Greetings, Loremasters. Tonight, our chronicle covers a topic that has likely crossed the mind of every soul who has ever set foot in the northern province of Tamriel. We're exploring the paradoxical nature of the Dragonborn's journey, specifically focusing on 15 reasons why the central narrative, the tale of the World Eater and the saving of Nirn, is often the very first thing adventurers abandon. It is a story of urgency ignored, of destiny delayed, and of the immense magnetic pull of the mundane over the mythological. We begin at the beginning, where the fires of destruction meet the flowers of the field. Picture yourself there now. The air is crisp, biting at your exposed skin. The scent of pine resin and snow hangs heavy in the wind. You are awake, you are unbound, and the entire world stretches out before you in a tapestry of whites, greys, and vibrant greens. But there is a shadow looming over this beauty, a massive winged shadow that demands your attention. Or at least it tries to. Let's be honest, trying to parkour up a mountain in real life usually ends in a broken ankle. Not a shortcut to High Hrothgar, but in Skyrim, defying the laws of physics and narrative urgency is practically a rite of passage. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you're settling in for the night, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time the clock reads in your part of the world. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Dragonborn stands at the exit of the cave leading out of Helgen. Behind them, the smoke still rises in a choking black column, a grim testament to the return of Alduin, the first dragon, the World Eater. The narrative drumbeat here is loud and frantic. The script, written by the Fates, or perhaps just the quest designers, screams that time is of the essence. A literal god of destruction has returned to the mortal plane. The very fabric of reality is threatened. The logical, urgent response for any character witnessing such an apocalypse would be to sprint until their lungs burned, making a beeline for Riverwood to sound the alarm, and then onward to the Jarl of Whiterun to mobilise the legions. The stakes could not possibly be higher. The end of the Kalpa, the cycle of the world, is nigh, and yet, the moment the Dragonborn steps out of that damp cave and the blinding glare of the sun adjusts to reveal the landscape of Falkreath Hold, something strange happens. The music shifts. It isn't the pounding war drums of the cart ride, nor the dissonant strings of the dragon's attack. It is Jeremy Soul's Secunda, or Far Horizons, sweeping, gentle, and utterly devoid of panic. The wind rustles through the pine needles with a soft, hypnotic hiss. A hawk screeches high above, circling lazily in a cloudless sky. The disconnect is immediate and profound. The game world itself seems to grab the player by the shoulders and whisper, "There is no rush." This is the first and perhaps most potent reason the main quest becomes skippable. The crushing weight of false urgency versus the serene invitation of the wild. The narrative insists that the world is ending right now, but the simulation proves that the world is actually just beginning. Consider the path immediately following the escape. Ralof or Hadvar, depending on who the Dragonborn followed through the flames, will offer an invitation to stick together. They urge the hero to head to Riverwood. But just off the beaten path, barely a few yards away, there is distraction. It isn't a demon or a soldier, it is a simple blue mountain flower. It sways gently in the breeze, and next to it, a butterfly, a monarch or a blue dartwing, flutters near a patch of thistle. For many, this is the true beginning of the game, and the end of the main quest for perhaps 40 or 50 hours. The urge to harvest, to collect, to interact with the tactile elements of the world overrides the abstract threat of a dragon who has, by now, flown off to parts unknown. There is a deep primal satisfaction in the harvest sound effect. Click. You have found a flower. Click. You have caught a butterfly. It is ASMR for the gatherer's soul. This mechanic of gathering is not just a gameplay loop. It is a lore-grounded interaction with the environment that deepens the player's connection to the land, ironically making them care more about the dirt under their boots than the sky above their heads. Alchemy in Skyrim is based on the idea that the land itself possesses magical properties. Every blue mountain flower and wheat stalk collected creates a potion that restores health, a tangible, immediate benefit that saves the Dragonborn's life in the here and now, unlike the Jarl's gratitude, which is miles away. The cognitive dissonance here is fascinating. The Dragonborn is told they are the ultimate hero, a figure of prophecy, but the most rewarding early game behaviour is to act like an itinerant hobo, stripping every bush of its berries and chasing insects into the river. The game does not punish you for this. In fact, it rewards you. You level up. Your alchemy skill increases. You discover effects. You make gold. The world of Skyrim reinforces the idea that taking your time is good, while the story tries to convince you that taking your time is suicide. There is a rather obscure, somewhat unsettling piece of environmental storytelling that many players overlook in their initial wanderings, which further separates the lore hunter from the quest rusher. Scattered across the province, hidden in jars, are unique insect specimens: a bee, a dragonfly, a moth, each with a mysterious rune inscribed on the inside of the jar's lid. These are known as the bug jars. For years, players have scrutinized these items, trying to decipher if they are part of a grand conspiracy, a cut quest involving the Thalmor, or a ritual to summon a great apocalypse. While developers have hinted they were mostly just cut content related to a scrapped quest, within the game's immersive reality, they represent the deep, hidden mysteries of the world that have nothing to do with dragons. Finding one of these jars feels like stumbling upon a secret magic, a quiet riddle left by a hermit, which is infinitely more compelling than being shouted at by a guard to move along. This tension between the main quest's pace and the open world's pace creates a scenario where the Dragonborn stops being a hero and starts being a tourist. You leave the Guardian Stones, the warrior, mage and thief standing silent vigil by the roadside, and you see the Bleak Falls Barrow arches towering over the mountain pass. It looks ominous, it looks dangerous, it looks like work. But down by the river the water is rushing over smooth stones, and you can see salmon leaping upstream. Why climb into a dusty Draugr-infested crypt to fetch a stone tablet for a wizard you haven't even met yet, when you could catch salmon, cook a steak, and watch the moons rise over Lake Ilinalta? The false urgency is shattered completely by the game's mechanics. If you never go to Whiterun, the dragons never spawn. The world remains in a state of perpetual uneasy peace. The civil war simmers but does not boil over. Alduin presumably waits politely in the ether, checking his watch, wondering where his nemesis is. This leads to a popular community discussion, a fan theory that touches on the metaphysics of the Elder Scrolls universe, the concept of the prisoner. In Elder Scrolls lore, the protagonist is often referred to as the prisoner, a figure who is unbound by the chains of causality that bind other NPCs. While Sotha Sil and other metaphysical heavyweights argue that everyone else is trapped in a predetermined script, the prisoner has the unique power of choice. Fans argue that this ability to ignore the main quest is not just a gameplay feature, but the Dragonborn's true superpower. By refusing to go to the Western Watchtower, the Dragonborn essentially uses their metaphysical will to freeze the apocalypse in place. The refusal to engage with the urgency is, ironically, the most effective way to keep Skyrim safe. As long as you are picking flowers, no villages are being burned, so the Dragonborn wanders. They find a shack where a hunter lives. They find a bandit camp and clear it out, not because a Jarl ordered it, but because they needed the steel boots the bandit chief was wearing. The narrative glides from save the world to survive the afternoon. The sky darkens, and the aurora borealis begins to shimmer, ribbons of green and violet dancing over the throat of the world. It is breathtaking. It invites contemplation, not combat. Even the enemies in the wild contribute to this shift in focus. You might encounter a wolf or perhaps a mud crab by the water's edge. These are manageable threats. They ground the experience. Fighting a wolf feels visceral and real. It's a struggle for survival in a harsh land. Fighting a metaphysical dragon god feels abstract. The wolf wants to eat you. Alduin wants to eat time, the world, the concept of existence. It's too big. The human brain, and by extension the player's immersion, latches onto the immediate understandable threat. The mud crab pinching your toe is a more pressing matter than the ancient prophecy. This creates a rhythm that the main quest simply cannot match. The rhythm of the wild is explore, gather, camp, survive. The rhythm of the main quest is fast travel, listen to dialogue, fetch, kill, repeat. One feels like living, the other feels like working. And in a world as lovingly crafted as Skyrim, nobody wants to clock in for a shift. They want to get lost. As the Dragonborn moves further from Helgen, the smoke fades from view. The screams of the dying are replaced by the chirping of crickets. The urgency evaporates, replaced by a profound sense of ownership over one's own destiny. You're not a soldier in a cosmic war. You're a traveller in a strange land. You check your inventory: 3 apples, a rusty iron dagger, and a handful of purple mountain flowers. It's not much, but it feels like a start. A start to a story you're writing yourself, rather than one written for you. And just as you settle into this peaceful rhythm, picking your way through the underbrush, perhaps deciding to head toward Falkreath instead of Riverwood, the game eventually tries to pull you back. But the damage is done. The hook has failed to set. The wild has claimed you. The dragons can wait. The flowers cannot. However, even if the Dragonborn eventually succumbs to the pressure and makes their way toward the main settlements, they run headfirst into organizations that seem designed to drain every ounce of enthusiasm for the task at hand. If the wild offers freedom, the heroes of the main quest offer something far worse: bureaucracy and bad attitudes. If the wilds of Skyrim seduce the Dragonborn with a sweet whisper of freedom, the main quest counters with the jarring, shrill command of middle management. We leave the sun-dappled forests and the meditative alchemy sessions to finally engage with the plot, only to run headlong into one of the most abrasive personalities in Tamrielic history. Enter Delphine, the grandmaster of making players want to turn around and go back to picking flowers. The narrative friction begins in earnest with a classic bait and switch. You have trudged through the Draugr-infested depths of Ustengrav, a tomb that smells of old bones and stagnant water, to retrieve the horn of Jurgen Windcaller. You're doing this at the behest of the Greybeards, mystic monks who actually seem to respect your time mostly. You reach the final pedestal, expecting the artifact, ready for the dopamine hit of quest completed. Instead, you find a note. A sarcastic, "I've taken the item, come meet me if you want it" note. It is the adventurer's equivalent of a "sorry we missed you" delivery slip, but with more attitude. This leads you back to Riverwood, to the Sleeping Giant Inn, and into the secret basement of the innkeeper, Delphine. Here, the grand reveal occurs. She is a member of the Blades. Now, for those who played The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, the Blades conjure images of noble spies and imperial bodyguards, the guys in the cool katanas who protected Patrick Stewart. But the Skyrim iteration of the Blades, represented almost entirely by Delphine, is a different beast altogether. She's paranoid, demanding, and seemingly confused about the power dynamic. This Blade's historical role, and here is your core in-game fact, is quite specific. They began as the Akaviri Dragon Guard, invaders from the continent of Akavir who eventually swore loyalty to Raymond Cyrodiil because they recognized him as a Dragonborn. Their entire organizational purpose, the very reason they exist in the lore, is to serve the Dragonborn. Their oath is to protect and aid the Dragonborn, not the other way around. They are the shield, the Dragonborn is the sword. Yet from the moment Delphine steps out of her humble innkeeper persona, she attempts to grab the hilt. She doesn't ask for help, she demands proof. She effectively holds the Horn of Jurgen Windcaller hostage, an artifact of extreme religious significance, until you dance to her tune. She forces you to head to Kynesgrove to slay the dragon Salaknir, not because it saves a village, though it does, but because she needs to see it for herself. She treats the legendary last Dragonborn, the figure of prophecy, like a new hire on a probationary period who might steal office supplies. This dynamic is jarring. The player has just shouted a dragon out of the sky near Whiterun and absorbed its soul. The Jarl calls you Thanes. The Greybeards shout your name so loud it shakes the tectonic plates. And then Delphine looks at you and essentially says, "Yeah, maybe. But I'm the boss here." It's an aggressive incompetence. Aggressive in her demeanour, incompetent in her inability to recognise that she needs you infinitely more than you need her. This brings us to a rather fascinating, slightly obscure lore tidbit found in the Rise and Fall of the Blades, and other in-game text referencing the Great War. The Blades didn't just fade away, they were systematically hunted and decapitated by the Thalmor. In a grim event known as the Night of Green Fire, Thalmor agents executed Blades members across the Dominion. Delphine is a survivor of a purge, which explains her paranoia. However, looking deeper into the annals of the Dragon Guard, one realises that the organisation has a history of overreaching. In the First Era, under the command of a Grandmaster named Gelinbrawl, the Dragon Guard actually tried to dictate military policy to the Emperor, leading to their temporary disbandment. It seems to be in their DNA. They start as servants, but inevitably convince themselves they are the masters. Delphine isn't an anomaly. She is the culmination of centuries of organisational drift. This attitude creates a massive disconnect for the player. Why should the demigod hero follow the orders of a failed spy living in a basement? This question fuels a massive community debate that has raged since 2011. The Delphine hate is almost universal. Fans often point out that if the Dragonborn is the ultimate authority on dragon matters, having the soul of a dragon, then the Blades are technically committing treason by disobeying or manipulating them. The debate often centres on the concept of service versus control. Is Delphine a tragic figure trying to keep a dying order alive with tough love, or is she a power-hungry zealot who sees the Dragonborn merely as a weapon to be pointed at her enemies? Most players lean toward the latter. Her incompetence shines through in her plans. Her great plan to infiltrate the Thalmor embassy involves handing all your gear to a wood elf and walking through the front door. A plan that has a high probability of getting the only hope for the world killed. Furthermore, she constantly dismisses the greybeards. She calls them superstitious old men who sit on a mountain and do nothing. Yet the greybeards are the ones who actually teach the Dragonborn how to use their power. Delphine teaches you nothing. She gives you no shouts, no ancient Akaviri techniques, no stat boosts. She just gives you map markers and attitude. In terms of gameplay rewards, the ally provides negative value. She interrupts your training to send you on errands. This creates a narrative friction that makes the main quest feel like a chore. In a role-playing game, players want to feel agency. They want to feel like the driving force of the story. Delphine's script removes that agency. You aren't hunting Alduin because you feel a burning desire to save the world. You are hunting Alduin because Delphine won't shut up until you do. She nags the narrative forward, and let's look at the blade aspect itself. The signature weapon, the Dragonbane Katana, is cool. Let's give credit where it's due. It does extra damage to dragons and has a unique lightning effect, but you find it in Skyhaven Temple, a place you have to open with your blood. Delphine just tags along. Even when you rebuild the blades, bringing her recruits to populate the temple, she acts as the gatekeeper. You do the recruiting, she does the commanding. The Dragonborn becomes a glorified HR consultant for an organisation that treats them like a tool. The aggressive incompetence peaks when you realise that for all her talk of stopping the dragons, the blades have been remarkably ineffective at it for hundreds of years. They failed to stop the Oblivion Crisis. Martin Septim did that. They failed to see the Thalmor threat until it was too late, and now, faced with the World Eater, their strategy is, let's ask the Dragonborn to do it, but be really rude about it. It is no wonder that after the initial meeting in Riverwood and the subsequent trip to Kynes Grove, many adventurers look at their quest log, see, talk to Delphine, and decide that now is a fantastic time to join the Thieves Guild instead. Brynjolf might be a crook, and the Thieves Guild lives in a literal sewer, but at least they are honest about their transactional relationship. They say, steal this and you get paid. Delphine says, save the world, and I might stop scowling at you for 5 minutes. The emotional payout of the Blade storyline is bankrupt. There is no warmth, no camaraderie. Even the secret room in the Sleeping Giant Inn, while cool in concept, feels sterile. It's a room full of maps and dusty armour, inhabited by a woman who looks at the saviour of mankind and sees an errand boy. As the Dragonborn leaves Kynes Grove, having slain a dragon and proven their identity beyond a shadow of a doubt, Delphine finally deigns to share her intel. She suspects the Thalmor are bringing the dragons back. This deduction, as we will see, is wildly incorrect, showcasing yet another layer of her incompetence. But getting to that realization requires wading through more political intrigue and stubbornness. So, the player stands at a crossroads. To the west, the Reach offers ancient dwarven ruins and forsworn mysteries. To the east, the Rift offers autumn forests and the warmth of a city that, while corrupt, is alive. And right in front of them is Delphine, tapping her foot, demanding they head to Solitude to meet a contact. Is it any surprise that the Dragonborn suddenly remembers a very urgent need to level up their smithing skill by crafting 500 iron daggers? The forge is hot, the metal is compliant, and the iron ingots never talk back. The blades can wait. In fact, if they are the guardians of the world, let them guard it for a while. We have daggers to make. But if you think Delphine's demands are a drag on the pacing, She is a veritable speedrunner compared to the other faction vying for the Dragonborn's soul. Up on the highest peak in Tamriel, a group of old men are waiting to teach you how to shout, provided you have the patience of a saint and a fondness for unskippable dialogue. The bureaucracy of the Blades is bad, but the glacial meditation of the mountains is a different kind of endurance test. If Delphine is the jarring alarm clock that you can't snooze, the Greybeards are the warm, heavy blanket that pins you to the mattress, whispering that you really should just stay in bed for another century or two. We leave the frenetic paranoia of the Blades to ascend the 7,000 steps, a journey that promises enlightenment but mostly delivers cardiovascular distress and a masterclass in narrative stalling. The Way of the Voice is presented as the spiritual backbone of the main quest. It is the training montage, the moment the hero learns to harness their latent power, and conceptually, it is magnificent. You climb the highest mountain in the world, the throat of the world, to meet the masters of the Thuum. But the execution of this training is designed to pump the brakes on the story so hard that the passengers go flying through the windshield. The climb itself is the first hurdle. 7,000 steps. It sounds legendary. In practice, it is a long, winding path plagued by wolves, the occasional ice wraith, and usually one very angry frost troll who acts as the unofficial gatekeeper of the mid-game. This troll has ended more permadeath runs than Alduin himself. He is the reality check of the mountain. But let's assume you survive the troll, bypass the pilgrims reading the emblems, and reach the monastery of High Hrothgar. You enter the stone halls, the wind howling outside, the chanting deep and resonant. The atmosphere is thick with reverence. Arngeir, the mouthpiece of the Greybeards, greets you, and then the talking starts, and it continues, and it continues. The Greybeards do not speak in sound bites. They speak in paragraphs, with pauses so pregnant they could birth triplets. This is where the narrative momentum goes to die. You are eager to learn the shout, to feel the power of the dragons coursing through your veins. But the Greybeards of High Hrothgar operate on geological time. They require you to demonstrate a shout, then they deliberate. Then they teach you a word. Then they ask you to shout at a phantom target. Then they congratulate you. Then they tell you to go outside for the next lesson. It is a slow, ritualistic tutorial that feels unskippable because, well, it is. You cannot rush enlightenment. The core in-game fact here is the philosophy of the Way of the Voice. Jurgen Windcaller, the founder of the Greybeards, established that the voice should be used only for the worship and glory of the gods, specifically Kine, not for martial conquest. This pacifist philosophy is diametrically opposed to the player's existence. You are a video game protagonist. Your primary interaction with the world is hitting things with other things. The Greybeards spend hours telling you not to use your cool new powers to hurt people, which is exactly what you plan to do the moment you leave the mountain. The friction is palpable. The game gives you a flamethrower or a shout thrower and then sends you to a pacifist boarding school. Every time you return to High Hrothgar for guidance or to locate a word of power, you have to sit through a lecture on humility. Speak only in true need, Arngeir chides. Meanwhile, you just used unrelenting force to blast a bandit off a cliff because it was funny. The disconnect between the lore and the gameplay loop is immense, but the true pacing killer is the Horn of Jurgen Windcaller quest we touched on earlier. The Greybeards send you to the bottom of a swamp to retrieve a horn simply to prove you can. It's a fetch quest disguised as a spiritual trial, and when you return, after the Delphine Detour, you have to endure the formal recognition ceremony. This ceremony, while atmospheric, is a nightmare for replayability. The Greybeards surround you, they shout at you, The screen shakes. You have to stand perfectly still and take it. It's a powerful moment the first time you see it. The Dovahkiin chant swelling, the realization of your destiny. The 5th time, you're jumping in circles, knocking over goblets, trying to glitch the animation to make it go faster. There is a fascinating, obscure lore tidbit hidden in the Pocket Guide to the Empire, and other texts regarding the Greybeards that adds a layer of irony to their sluggishness. Historically, the Greybeards were not always so passive. In fact, prior to Jurgen Windcaller, the Tongues, users of the voice, were the siege artillery of the Nord armies. They shouted down castle walls. The Greybeards are essentially a containment strategy for a weapon of mass destruction. They are keeping the Dragonborn on a leash. Some theorists even argue that the Greybeards' refusal to act is a form of cowardice, a retreat from the responsibility of power. This leads to a prominent community debate. Parthenax versus the Blades. Starts here, but the seed is the Greybeards' passivity. Fans debate whether the Greybeards are actually helpful. They hoard the knowledge of the words of power. They sit on the only location where Alduin can be defeated, the Time Wound, yet they do nothing to prepare for it until you force their hand. They are the ultimate neutrals, and in a story about the end of the world, neutrality feels like an obstacle. The pacing is further dragged down by the whirlwind sprint tutorial. You are taken to the courtyard. Borri opens the gate. You have to sprint through. If you mess up the timing, you have to do it again. It's a mini-game that feels like it belongs in a platformer, not an epic RPG. And let's not forget the climb to the very peak to meet Parthenax later, but we are getting ahead of ourselves. The contrast between the Greybeards' wait-and-see approach and the open world's go-and-do approach is stark. While Angeir is lecturing you on the metaphysics of Ro, you know there is a civil war brewing. There are vampires attacking cities. There are Daedric princes offering you artifacts. The Greybeards demand you ignore all of that to focus on your inner self. It is a noble request, but a boring one, and frankly the rewards for sticking with the Greybeards are minimal. They point you toward words of power, yes, but you can find those on your own by just exploring, which, as established, is more fun. They provide lore, but they dole it out so slowly it feels like dial-up internet in a fibre-optic world. Imagine the frustration of a player who has just slain Mermulnir. The adrenaline is pumping. You're ready to hunt dragons. You go to the Greybeards and they tell you to go fetch a horn and think about your feelings. It creates a massive ludonarrative dissonance. The game tells you the stakes are high, but the quest givers act like they have all the time in the world. Even the architecture of High Hrothgar reinforces this isolation. It is cold, stone, and empty. There are no merchants, no bards, no life. It is a tomb for the living. Comparing this to the bustle of Whiterun or the intrigue of Rifton makes the monastery feel lifeless. Players rush the main quest here not because they are invested, but because they want to get it over with so they never have to climb those steps again. As you finally leave the mountain, having been shouted at, lectured, and sent on a fetch quest, the valley below looks more inviting than ever. The lights of Everstead twinkle in the distance. The road to Rifton beckons. You have learned the way of the voice, which in gameplay terms means you have unlocked a cooldown timer on your shout. The Greybeards serve an important role in the lore, grounding the Dragonborn in the Nord tradition. But as a narrative vehicle, they are a flat tire. They stop the car to explain how the engine works, while the passengers just want to drive. So you descend the mountain, perhaps using whirlwind sprint to bypass a few switchbacks, eager to get back to the action. You've dealt with the paranoid spy and the slow-talking monks. Surely the next leg of the journey will offer some high-stakes excitement? Surely the hunt for the Thalmor intel will be a thrill ride? Well, not exactly. Because just as you get back into the flow of the world, the story decides it's time to play dress-up and attend a cocktail party. The narrative whiplash continues as we trade our iron armour for party clothes and trade dragon slaying for awkward social stealth. The Thalmor are waiting, and unfortunately so is one of the clunkiest quests in the entire game. Descending from the philosophical heights of High Hrothgar, where the air is thin and the wisdom is dense, the Dragonborn returns to the messy reality of sea-level politics. The transition is jarring. One moment you are contemplating the eternal silence of the sky. The next, you are being told to put on a pair of itchy party clothes and rub elbows with the high society of the Aldmeri Dominion. We have arrived at Diplomatic Immunity, a quest that serves as a masterclass in how to kill narrative momentum with a single loading screen. This section of the main quest is a strange beast. It pivots the genre of the game entirely. Skyrim is an epic fantasy action RPG. It is about shouting, swinging axes, and casting fireballs. Suddenly Delphine, who as we've established is the architect of the Dragonborn's misery, decides that the game should briefly become a stealth espionage thriller. She's convinced the Thalmor are behind the return of the dragons. Her evidence? A hunch? Her plan? Send the most conspicuous person in Skyrim into the most heavily guarded building in the province. The setup begins in solitude at the Winking Skeever Inn. You meet Malborn, a nervous wood elf who acts as your inside man. This interaction triggers a specific kind of anxiety known only to RPG hoarders. You have to give Malborn the gear you want to smuggle into the embassy. This forces a terrifying Sophie's choice of inventory management. Do you trust Malborn with your Daedric Warhammer? What if you need your potions? What if he loses your favourite boots? The game strips you of your power, your gear, and leaves you feeling naked and vulnerable. For a player who has spent 40 hours crafting the perfect armour set, this forced disarming is not a fun challenge. It is a violation of the power fantasy. Then comes the party itself. You arrive at the Thalmor Embassy, a fortress of elven arrogance perched on the cliffs. You are wearing party clothes, which offer zero protection and look roughly like a burlap sack designed by a committee. You hand your invitation to the guards. You step inside. The atmosphere is thick with fake politeness and sweet rolls. Elenwen, the first emissary, greets you with a predator's smile. This is Elenwen, a character who embodies the Thalmor threat, a core in-game fact that players encounter here, often without realising the gravity of it, is her sheer diplomatic immunity, hence the title. She was present at the signing of the White Gold Concordat. She is the literal face of the Empire's humiliation, and yet you cannot touch her. You have to smile, nod, and order a drink. The objective is to create a distraction to slip away from the party. This usually involves liquoring up a man named Razalan, a merchant who is more interested in the Colovian brandy than the geopolitical implications of his presence. Watching Razalan make a scene is admittedly one of the few highlights of this quest. It captures the absurdity of the situation. The fate of the world hinges on a drunk man shouting about his love life so the Dragonborn can slip through a kitchen door. Once you are behind the scenes, the gameplay shifts to stealth. Now Skyrim's stealth mechanics are functional, but they are designed for caves and shadows, not well-lit hallways filled with wizard guards. Unless you have invested heavily in the sneak skill, this section inevitably devolves into a chaotic brawl. You are running through corridors in your finery, punching wizards until you find a chest with your smuggled gear. It is less James Bond and more angry tourist lost in a museum. But the real narrative killer lies in the destination, the solar of the embassy, where the secret documents are kept. You fight your way through, you kill the torturer, or sneak past him, and you open the chest to find the truth. And here is the punchline, the great reveal that makes you question why you bothered with this entire detour. The Thalmor don't know anything. The documents reveal that the Thalmor are just as confused about the dragons as everyone else. They are investigating the return of the dragons, not causing it. Delphine was wrong. Her intel was barely a conspiracy theory. You risked your life, lost your dignity in those party clothes, and slaughtered half the embassy staff just to confirm a negative. In terms of narrative satisfaction, it is a hollow victory. However, the chest does contain one of the most explosive lore bombs in the entire game, a document that sparks the fiercest community debate in the fandom, the Thalmor Dossier, Ulfric Stormcloak. This piece of paper changes the context of the entire civil war. The dossier lists Ulfric as an asset, though currently uncooperative, and reveals that he was captured and interrogated by Elenwen during the Great War. It suggests that the Thalmor allowed him to escape to foment the civil war, weakening the Empire. Fans have argued for over a decade about the interpretation of asset. Does it mean Ulfric is a traitor working for the elves? Or does it simply mean his chaotic nature is useful to them, regardless of his intent? This single document makes the Civil War storyline infinitely more complex and interesting than the main dragon quest. It inadvertently convinces the player that the political intrigue is the real story, and the dragons are just background noise. There is also an obscure lore tidbit hidden in the embassy's dungeon that many rush past. In one of the cells, you can find the body of a man named Kemri Etienne Ranis, or sometimes a different prisoner depending on your speed, but often there are notes indicating the Thalmor are hunting for someone named Esbern. But more chillingly, looking at the Thalmor Manual of Procedure, or listening to the ambient dialogue of the torturers reveals the depth of their metaphysical cruelty. The Thalmor don't just want to rule Tamriel. Some deep lore interpretations, the Tower Theory, suggest they want to unmake reality itself to return to a state of pure spirit, escaping the prison of the mortal plane. While this isn't explicitly spelled out in the diplomatic immunity quest, the sheer cold, clinical nature of their torture chamber hints at a goal far more alien than simple conquest. The quest ends with an escape through the reeking cave. You drop down a trapdoor, a classic point of no return, and find yourself in a troll's den. Yes, after the high society party and the wizard duel, you're back to fighting a frost troll in a damp cave. It is the game's way of resetting the status quo. You emerge into the snow, smelling of troll fat and expensive wine, with a new objective: find Esbern in Rifton. The diplomatic immunity quest is a bottleneck. It is the point where many playthroughs die. Why? Because it removes the freedom of the sandbox. It locks you into a linear, scripted sequence where you cannot use your full arsenal initially, and forces you into a playstyle, stealth, that you might not enjoy. It feels like a different game, and not necessarily a better one. Moreover, it reinforces the incompetence of your allies. Delphine sent you on a wild goose chase. She endangered the operation based on a bad guess. As you stand in the snow outside the embassy, looking at the map marker pointing to the far southeast corner of the map, Rifton, you feel a wave of exhaustion. Rifton, the city of thieves. To get there, you have to cross the entire province, and once you get there, you have to navigate the Ratway. The narrative isn't gliding forward, it is stumbling. You aren't chasing a dragon. You're chasing an old man who lives in a sewer because the paranoid innkeeper told you to. The majesty of the Dragonborn concept is fading. You don't feel like a hero of legend. You feel like a private investigator working a cold case. And the next leg of the journey doesn't promise glory. It promises filth, darkness, and one of the most exposition-heavy conversations in the history of the franchise. The call of the wild returns. Why go to the Ratway? Why not head north to Winterhold and join the college? At least there, they give you a room and let you shoot lightning at things. Or perhaps head to the plains of Whiterun and hunt mammoths. Anything seems better than descending into the bowels of a city to find a man who talks to walls. But the bullet points of fate and this outline demand we continue. We must trudge to Rifton. We must brave the sewers. And we must prepare ourselves for the vocal stylings of Esbern, the man who knows everything but takes forever to say it. From the pristine frost-bitten cliffs of Hrothgar, the narrative drags us by the collar to the opposite end of the map, to the dank mist-shrouded canals of Rifton. If the Thalmor embassy was a cold shower of political reality, the Ratway is a warm bath in pure misery. We are here to find Esbern, the Loremaster of the Blades, and unfortunately he has chosen to hide in the one place designed to test the patience of even the most dedicated cartographer, the Rifton sewers. The journey begins in the city above, a place that perpetually looks like it's autumn and smells like corruption. But we aren't here for the Thieves' Guild or the Temple of Mara. We are here to descend. The Ratway is a notorious noob trap of navigation. It is dark, it is twisting, and it is populated by low-life enemies who exist solely to impede your movement speed. You fight a pugilist who drops gloves that boost unarmed damage. A fun item, admittedly, but he is just a speed bump. You fight the deranged chef. You fight the Thalmor agents who have somehow squeezed their pristine elven armour through the sludge pipes. The environmental storytelling here is oppressive. The soundscape shifts from the epic orchestral score to the dripping of water and the squeaking of rats. It is claustrophobic, and deep within this labyrinth, behind a heavily reinforced door with a sliding peephole, lives Esbern. Finding the door is half the battle, getting it open is the other half. When you finally knock, you are greeted by the voice of the legendary Max von Sydow. It is a voice of gravitas, of ancient wisdom, and of extreme paranoia. This is Esbern Jewel, the keeper of the law, but before you can bask in his wisdom, you have to convince him you aren't a hallucination or a Thalmor assassin. This interaction is the infamous exposition dump of the main quest. Once Esbern lets you in, after an agonizingly slow sequence of unlocking multiple deadbolts and chains, he doesn't just say, "Let's go." He begins to unload the history of the world. He talks about the return of the dragons not as a battle to be won, but as a mathematical certainty he's been calculating in his head for years. He is the conspiracy theorist who turned out to be right, and like any vindicated conspiracy theorist, he wants to walk you through all his evidence. Here, we encounter a core in-game fact that shifts the stakes. Esbern reveals that Alduin is not just a big dragon. He is the World Eater. He has returned to devour the world to end the current Kalpa age, so the next one can begin. This elevates the threat from monster attack to existential deletion. Yet hearing this in a damp room filled with half-eaten bread and dusty books creates a strange dissonance. The fate of the universe is being discussed by a hoarding hermit in a sewer. It feels small, contained, and academic. This section is also legendary in the community for a reason that has nothing to do with lore. The Esbern voice glitch. At launch, and for a long time after, A notorious bug caused Esbern's voice files to fail to load, or for the script to hang, meaning he would never open the door. Thousands of Dragonborn stood outside that door, pounding on it, while the fate of the world paused because a sound file was missing. It is a meta moment where the fragility of the game's code perfectly mirrors the fragility of the Blade's plan. Once the dialogue concludes, you are faced with an escort mission. You have to lead Esbern out of the Ratway. Escort missions are the bane of the RPG genre, and this one is no exception. Esbern is a powerful mage, capable of summoning Paarthurnax and casting fireballs, but his AI often prefers to stare at a wall or run directly into a bear trap. As you trudge back through the sewers, fighting off the Thalmor kill squad sent to intercept you, the pacing grinds to a halt. You are babysitting. There is an obscure lore tidbit tucked away in Esbern's dialogue and his messy room that many players miss in their rush to leave. He references the 30th of Frostfall. This is the date the Great War began, but it is also a date obsessed over by the Blades. Among his scattered papers, you can find notes referencing the prophecy of the Dragonborn in chaotic detail, linking the tower, the White Gold Tower, and the king, the Emperor. Esbern isn't just hiding. He's trying to decode the Elder Scrolls without actually having one. He is practicing a form of mythic calculus, trying to predict the exact moment the world ends. It's a fascinating insight into how magic and math intersect in the Elder Scrolls, but it's buried under layers of tedious dialogue. The community debate here often centers on the Thalmor competence paradox. How did the Thalmor know exactly where Esbern was the moment you arrived, but failed to catch him for the 30 years prior? Did the Dragonborn lead them there? Or were they always watching, waiting for him to make a move? It makes the player feel like a pawn. By trying to save Esbern, you effectively doxed him. Eventually you drag him to Riverwood to meet Delphine. The reunion is underwhelming. They bicker, they catch up, they ignore you, and then they give you the next objective, Skyhaven Temple. You have to travel to the Reach, clear out a massive dungeon of Forsworn, the Karthspire, and find Alduin's Wall. We will fast forward through the Karthspire, which is essentially just a combat gauntlet, to the moment at the Wall. Here, Esbern translates the ancient bas-reliefs. He points to the stone and says, "Look! The ancient Nords used a special shout to defeat Alduin." And this is the pivot point, the revelation. To learn this shout, you need to ask the Greybeards. The Greybeards begrudgingly tell you that you can't just learn it. You have to see it in the past, and to see the past you need Ngi, Elder Scroll. Suddenly the scope of the quest explodes. You aren't just hunting a dragon, you're hunting a fundamental artifact of creation. The Elder Scrolls are fragments of creation itself, things that drive men mad just by looking at them. The quest, Elder Knowledge, begins. And where is this scroll? It is buried deep within the earth, in a lost Dwemer city that no one has seen for eras. To get there, you must find a mad scholar named Septimus Cygnus, living on an ice floe north of Winterhold. The narrative demands you leave the political squabbles of the Blades and the Greybeards behind and plunge into the unknown. You're heading to Blackreach, and while Blackreach is undeniably one of the most visually stunning locations in gaming history, it is also a massive, sprawling detour that has swallowed many playthroughs whole. The transition from listening to old people talk in sewers to dungeon crawling for 10 hours is abrupt. You leave the Ratway, you leave the temple, and you stand before the dwarven ruin of Alfdand. The wind howls, the snow swirls, you check your potions, you check your carry weight. You're about to enter a place from which there is no quick return. The main quest has finally offered a dungeon worthy of a hero. but it is a dungeon so vast, so overwhelming, that it often convinces players to retire right there on the spot. Why save the world when you can spend 3 weeks trying to find 30 Crimson Nirn roots, after traversing the icy wastes to find the mad scholar Septimus Cygnus, and enduring his ramblings about the heart of Lorcan and Dwemer lockboxes? The Dragonborn is pointed toward the depths. To find the Elder Scroll, one must go where even the Nords dare not tread. The ancient Dwemer city of Blackreach. If the previous sections were speed bumps, this is a full-on detour into a different dimension. The journey begins in Alfdand, or Mzinchaleft, or Raldpar, but usually Alfdand. It starts as a standard dungeon crawl. You fight spiders. You fight Dwemer spheres that roll out of the walls like murderous bowling balls. You descend past the snow line, deep into the earth where the pipes hiss and the steam obscures your vision. The dungeon fatigue sets in around the 40-minute mark. You have killed 50 Thalmor. You're over-encumbered with Dwemer struts you think you might need for smithing. Spoiler, you probably don't. And then you find the attunement sphere mechanism. The floor opens, a spiral staircase descends into the abyss, and you step out into silence. Blackreach is not just a location, it is a sensory event. It is a massive subterranean cavern that spans a huge portion of the Skyrim map, connecting 3 major Dwemer cities. The ceiling is so high, it has its own weather system. Huge bioluminescent mushrooms tower like trees, casting a cool alien blue light over the ruins. In the centre hangs a massive artificial sun, a glowing geode that bathes the silent city in an eerie warmth. It is arguably the most beautiful location in the entire game. It is also the place where the main quest goes to die of exposure. The sheer scale of Blackreach is paralysing. The compass, usually your best friend, becomes a confused mess of markers. There are Thalmor servants, Chorus reapers, and even a giant wandering the fungal forests. Why is there a giant down here? How did he get in? The game doesn't answer. It just offers the surreal image of a giant herding mammoths 2 miles underground. Narratively, this section is a black hole. You're here for an Elder Scroll, the most urgent artifact in existence, but the environment begs you to stop. Look at this glowing mineral, it whispers. Check out this pump station. I wonder what's inside the silent ruin. The urgency of the surface world feels like a distant memory. Alduin. Who? We are spelunking now. The pacing is murdered in cold blood by a specific side quest that triggers the moment you pick up a noisy red plant. A return to your roots. This is the infamous Crimson Nirn Root quest. You find a dead alchemist named Sindarian, a callback to Oblivion, and his journal asks you to collect 30 Crimson Nirn Roots. These plants are scattered across the massive, dark, confusing cavern. They emit a constant ringing chime that haunts the dreams of completionists. Here is the core in-game fact. Collecting 30 of these roots and bringing them to Avrusa Cerethi grants you Sindarian's Serendipity, a passive ability that gives you a 25% chance to create a duplicate potion when alchemying. Is it a good reward? Yes. Is it worth spending 3 hours running in circles in the dark while the world ends upstairs? Absolutely not. Yet thousands of players fall into the trap. They spend days down here ignoring the scroll, driven by the maddening chime of the roots. The obscure lore tidbit found here adds a layer of tragic horror to the beauty. Scattered around the Thalmor huts and the Dwemer buildings are signs of the great betrayal. The Snow Elves didn't just become Thalmor, they were twisted by the Dwemer. The Dwemer offered the Snow Elves sanctuary from the Nords, but forced them to eat a toxic fungus that blinded them and enslaved them. The entire ecosystem of Blackreach, The mushrooms, the chorus, is essentially a bioengineered prison farm. The Thalmor you fight are the devolved descendants of a noble race, living in the ruins of their jailers. It is a grim realization that makes the pretty lights feel a lot more sinister. Furthermore, there is a community legend regarding the artificial sun. If you use the unrelenting force shout on the massive orange globe hanging above the debate hall, you summon a secret dragon named Vulthuriel. He doesn't fly, he just crawls around on the ground, breathing fire. It is one of the game's best kept secrets, a boss fight hidden in the scenery. But fighting him offers no unique loot, no quest update. It is just another distraction, another reason to stay down here and not finish the game. Eventually, if you can tear yourself away from the Nirn roots and the mining veins, you reach the Tower of Zark. This is where the scroll is kept. You take a lift up to a massive brass observatory. The puzzle to retrieve the scroll is infamous for being solved by button mashing. It involves a lexicon, lenses, and beams of light. There is a logic to it, involving aligning the lenses to transcribe the knowledge, but 90% of players just hit the buttons on the right until the buttons on the left light up. It is a strangely anticlimactic end to the journey. You aren't outsmarting the Dwemer, you are brute-forcing their interface. The machine lowers, the capsule opens, you take the Elder Scroll, Dragon. It weighs 20 pounds. It glows with a terrifying energy. You have the item, and then you realise you have to leave. You can take the lift to the surface, emerging, blinking into the snow, often miles from where you started. The transition is disorienting. You have spent hours in the dark, silent depths. You have forgotten what the sky looks like. Blackreach is a masterpiece of world design, but a disaster for narrative pacing. It is too big, too interesting, and too disconnected from the main threat. It serves as a perfect example of why Skyrim is better as a sandbox than a story. The story wants you to grab the scroll and run. The sandbox wants you to live among the mushrooms. As you stand on the surface clutching the scroll, you might think the hard part is over. You have the knowledge. You have the shout, potentially. Now you just need to confront the villain. But first, you have to deal with the most agonizing moral choice in the game. A choice that forces you to betray the only character who has actually been helpful. The blades are calling again, and this time they want blood. Emerging from the subterranean fever dream of Blackreach, the Dragonborn returns to the surface with the Elder Scroll Dragon strapped to their back. You ascend the throat of the world once more, the biting wind feeling cleaner and sharper than the stagnant air of the Dwemer ruins. This moment, reading the Elder Scroll at the Time Wound, is arguably the narrative peak of the main quest. It is the moment you reach through time to learn Dragon Rend, the shout that forces a dragon to experience the concept of mortality. Mechanically and cinematically, this sequence is a triumph. You watch the ancient Nord heroes battle Alduin. You feel the weight of history. You learn the shout. Then, Alduin himself descends. The battle that follows is chaotic, desperate, and thrilling. You shout the World Eater out of the sky. You strike him with your weapon. His health bar depletes, but he does not die. He sneers at your power and flies away to recover his strength in the afterlife of Sovngarde. The victory is incomplete, but the momentum is high. You have the weapon. You know the enemy can be beaten. You just need to find out where he went. To do this, you need to trap one of his lieutenants, a dragon named Odahviing, in the Great Porch of Dragon's Reach. It is a solid plan. And then, the narrative slams into a brick wall constructed entirely of bad writing and misplaced moral absolutism. We have arrived at the Paarthurnax Dilemma. At this crucial juncture, usually after the season-unending council, or while discussing the plan to trap Odaviing, Delphine and Esbern drop a bombshell. They have realised that the leader of the Greybeards, your mentor Paarthurnax, is a dragon. Not just any dragon, but the former lieutenant of Alduin, a beast who committed atrocities during the ancient Dragon War. The Blades issue an ultimatum: kill Paarthurnax, or we will never speak to you again. This demand acts as a hard stop for an enormous percentage of players. It isn't just a difficult choice, it feels like a betrayal of the player's agency and a fundamental misunderstanding of the story being told. Parthenax is the one who taught you how to use the fire breath shout. He is the one who patiently explained the metaphysics of the time wound. He is the one who betrayed his own brother Alduin to teach the first human tongues the way of the voice, effectively saving humanity from extinction. The core in-game fact. Here is brutal. The Blades are technically right about his past. Parthenax was not an innocent bystander. He was a general in a genocidal war, but the game fails to acknowledge that his penance has lasted for thousands of years. He has sat in isolation on the peak of the world, meditating to overcome his innate drive to dominate. When you confront Parthenax with the Blades' demand, he delivers one of the most profound lines in the entire Elder Scrolls franchise. What is better, to be born good, or to overcome your evil nature through great effort? This question strikes at the heart of the moral conflict. Parthenax admits he is tempted every day to return to his old ways, but he chooses peace. This struggle makes him infinitely more human and sympathetic than the rigid, hateful dogma of Delphine. The obscure lore tidbit that makes the Blades' demand even more infuriating is related to the Ses meditations on the words of power. If you spare Paarthurnax and remain friendly with the Greybeards, he offers to meditate with you on specific words of power, Fus, Faim or Yol. These meditations provide unique permanent passive buffs, such as Force Without Effort, which makes you stagger less and stagger enemies more. From a pure gameplay perspective, Paarthurnax provides tangible, powerful benefits. What do the Blades offer if you kill him? They give you a generic dragon hunting radiant quest, and a potion from Esbern that reduces damage from dragons. A potion that, due to a bug in the original release, often didn't even work. The game mechanically incentivizes you to tell the Blades to get lost. This creates a scenario where the good guys, the Blades, are asking you to murder your kindly grandfather figure for crimes committed 4,000 years ago. It feels petty. It feels wrong. And because the vanilla game offers no option to talk the Blades down, no speech check, no "I'm the Dragonborn, I outrank you" command, players feel railroaded. The community reaction to this quest is the stuff of legends. The debate over party snacks. The affectionate nickname for the dragon is one of the few things that unites the Skyrim fan base. The Paarthurnax Dilemma mod, which restores a cut or improvised option to force the Blades to accept your decision to spare him, is consistently one of the most downloaded mods in the game's history. The fact that players feel the need to modify the game code to fix this narrative beat speaks volumes about how poorly it lands. By forcing this binary choice, the main quest effectively tells the player, you're not the hero of this story, you're just a weapon being pointed by conflicting ideologies. Many players, faced with the choice of killing their mentor or leaving the quest unfinished in their journal, choose the third option. They walk away. They decide that if saving the world requires murdering the only being who seemingly understands the burden of power, then the world can save itself. The Dragonborn looks at Delphine, looks at the map, and decides that the civil war, which has been simmering in the background this whole time, suddenly looks a lot more appealing. After all, General Tullius and Ulfric Stormcloak might be flawed, but at least they aren't asking you to kill your yoga instructor. So, the Dragonborn leaves Skyhaven Temple in disgust. The quest to trap Oderving is put on hold. The narrative momentum is shattered by moral indignation, and as we descend the mountain, looking for a war that makes sense, we find ourselves drawn into the conflict between the Empire and the Stormcloaks, a story that, surprisingly, manages to overshadow the apocalypse itself, leaving the Blades to stew in their own bitterness and Paarthurnax to meditate on his peak. The Dragonborn descends back into the fray of mortal affairs. And what a fray it is. While the threat of Alduin is cosmic, abstract, and arguably too large for the human mind to fully process on a Tuesday afternoon, the conflict brewing in the valleys below is visceral, loud, and immediate. We are talking, of course, about the Civil War. It is arguably the greatest narrative sleight of hand in Skyrim. The B-plot is infinitely more engaging than the A-plot. The return of the dragons is the box art, but the war for the province's soul is the game's heartbeat. As you wander the roads, you don't see dragons every 10 feet, unless you're very unlucky. But you do see patrols. You see 3 Imperial soldiers escorting a Stormcloak prisoner in rags. You see the Thalmor justiciars dragging a Talos worshipper to a black site. You hear the bards in the tavern singing the Age of Aggression or the Age of Oppression, the lyric shifting depending on whose territory you are drinking in. This conflict offers something the main quest desperately lacks: ideological nuance. Alduin is a force of nature. You cannot debate him. You cannot sit down with the World Eater and discuss the socio-economic implications of eating the timeline. He's just evil with a capital E. But the Civil War? That is a mess of greys, blood red, and imperial blue. On one side you have the Stormcloaks, led by Jarl Ulfric Stormcloak. They are fighting for religious freedom and national independence. They want to worship Talos, the hero god of mankind, without being dragged off by elven inquisitors. It is a compelling romantic cause. It screams freedom fighter. But then you walk into Windhelm, their capital, and see the segregation. You see the Argonians forced to live on the docks, the Dark Elves confined to the Grey Quarter, enduring racial slurs and neglect. The freedom they fight for seems to come with a very specific set of terms and conditions regarding race. On the other side, you have the Empire, led by General Tullius. They represent order, stability, and cosmopolitanism. They argue that a united empire is the only thing keeping the Aldmeri Dominion from conquering all of mankind. They are the pragmatists, but they are also a crumbling institution, forced to enforce the humiliating White Gold Concordat, effectively acting as the Thalmor's heavies. They are banning the worship of the very god who founded their empire to save their own skins. The community debate surrounding this choice. Imperials or Stormcloaks is the fiercest, longest-running argument in the Elder Scrolls fandom. Go to any forum, Reddit thread, or YouTube comment section from 2011 to today, and you will find thousands of words written in defense of each side. Players do not write essays about why Alduin should or shouldn't eat the world. Everyone agrees eating the world is bad, but ask someone if Ulfric is a hero or traitor, and you better bring a shield. This passion proves that the Civil War is the superior story hook. It forces the player to define who their Dragonborn actually is, politically and morally. The questline itself also feels more grounded in the reality of the world. The core in-game fact that sells the stakes is the changing of the Jarls, When you progress through the civil war, you actually depose the ruling jarls of the opposing holds. If you side with the Stormcloaks and take Whiterun, Jarl Balgruf, the man who likely gave you your first house, the man who helped you trap a dragon, is exiled. He is bitter, disappointed, and his children are uprooted. Seeing him in the basement of the Blue Palace in solitude, stripped of his title, hits harder than any burnt village. It is a personal consequence. The world state changes permanently based on your actions, something the main quest struggles to achieve until the very end. Furthermore, the battles, while limited by the engine technology of 2011, offer a sense of scale that dragon fights often miss. The Herdam, Battle for Whiterun, is a highlight. Catapults rain fire on the city, barricades block the streets, dozens of soldiers clash in the smoke. For a moment it feels like a real war. You aren't just poking a dragon's ankle, you're breaking a defensive line, you're storming a fort. Deep within this conflict lies an obscure lore tidbit that adds a tragic layer of complexity to the whole affair: the book, The Bear of Markarth. This text describes the Markarth incident, the event that effectively started the rebellion. It claims that Ulfric Stormcloak retook Markarth from the Forsworn, native Reachmen, and, in the process, committed war crimes, executing anyone who didn't fight with him. However, if you dig deeper and speak to the Jarl of Markarth or talk to Ulfric himself, you realise the book is imperial propaganda. But the truth is equally messy. Ulfric did retake the city, and the Empire did promise him free Talos worship in exchange, only to betray him when the Thalmor found out. It establishes that both sides are built on lies and broken promises. The Empire betrayed its hero, the hero became a fanatic. This focus on the Markarth incident also ties into the Forsworn conspiracy, arguably the best side quest chain in the game, further pulling you away from the dragons. Why worry about a myth when there is a literal conspiracy of corruption involving the Silver Blood family and the King in Rags happening right now? The Civil War also introduces the Jagged Crown, a quest that serves as a tantalizing glimpse of what could have been. You delve into Corvan Dune to retrieve the ancient crown of the High Kings. It is made of dragon bone and teeth. It is a symbol of supreme authority. For a brief moment, holding that crown, the Dragonborn feels like a kingmaker. You can even switch sides at this point, taking the crown to the opposing faction leader, a rare instance of genuine RPG choice and betrayal. Let's not overlook General Tullius and Ulfric themselves as characters. They're infinitely more charismatic than Alduin. Tullius is a weary, cynical professional who clearly hates the politics but respects the job. His voice actor, Michael Hogan, brings a gravelly, Battlestar Galactica-esque authority to the role. Ulfric is intense, brooding, and possesses a voice that could melt butter. Listening to his "Why I Fight" speech is a masterclass in rhetoric. Alduin just shouts "Die, mortal" in a made-up language. The villains, or antagonists depending on your view, of the Civil War are human. They have reasons, they have regrets. Even the rewards feel more relevant. Becoming a legate or a Stormblade grants you leveled armour and weapons that fit the aesthetic of a soldier. You feel part of a unit. The main quest gives you the respect of the Blades. A shout you can't use in town without getting arrested? The faction rewards of the Civil War reinforce the identity of the character. There is also a pervasive irony that makes the Civil War overshadow the main quest. The dragons make the war harder, and the war makes the dragons harder to fight. While you are besieging a fort, a dragon might swoop down and start roasting both sides. Soldiers will stop fighting each other to shoot arrows at the lizard. It's a moment of emergent gameplay that screams, If you idiots just work together, this would be easy. But as soon as the dragon falls, they go back to killing each other. It is a perfect encapsulation of human nature, ignoring the existential threat to settle petty grievances. And as a player, you are right there with them, caring more about capturing Fort Greenwall than finding the portal to Sovngarde. The Civil War storyline effectively hijacks the mid-game. It demands your attention. It blocks access to certain Jarls until you resolve their political allegiance. The season-unending quest, where you negotiate a truce so you can trap a dragon, is widely considered a nuisance because players would rather just win the war than pause it. Why sit at a table and argue about swapping Rifton for Markarth when you could just march an army in and take it? Ultimately, the Civil War feels like the true story of Skyrim because it is about Skyrim. It is about the people, the holds, the history, and the future of the nation. The Dragon Crisis feels like an external imposition, a generic fantasy trope grafted onto a deep political simulation. So the Dragonborn finds themselves wearing a darker shade of armour. They are sieging cities, receiving orders, and feeling the rush of leading a charge. The dragons are still out there circling the peaks, but they have become background noise, environmental hazards like a blizzard or a bear. The real monster is the other man across the shield wall. And once the war is resolved, or ignored long enough, and the Dragonborn looks for a new challenge, they might realise that the vanilla antagonists, Alduin, Ulfric, Tullius, are all a bit predictable. They lack a certain eldritch flair. They lack tentacles. They lack the ability to blot out the sun. This is where the expansions step in. If the Civil War provided a grounded human distraction, the DLCs provide a supernatural character-driven distraction that makes the World Eater look like a common nuisance. It is time to meet the real villains of Skyrim. While the Civil War offers the messy human drama of politics and betrayal, there remains a gaping void at the top of the antagonist hierarchy. We have to address the dragon in the room. Alduin is boring. He is a marvel of graphical design, certainly, a jagged obsidian nightmare of spikes and glowing red eyes. But as a character, he has the depth of a puddle in a drought. He shows up, shouts something about worms and doom, and flies away. He has no arc. He has no relatable motivation beyond "I am hungry and the world looks tasty." He is a force of nature, yes, but fighting a hurricane isn't nearly as satisfying as punching someone who personally insulted you. This is where the expansions, Dawnguard and Dragonborn, step in to show the main quest how it's done. They introduce villains who are not just obstacles, but twisted reflections of power, obsession, and the Dragonborn themselves. If Alduin is the boring boss who sends passive-aggressive emails, Lord Harkon and Miraak are the rivals who slash your tyres in the parking lot. Let's start with Lord Harkon, the primary antagonist of the Dawnguard DLC. You meet him not on a mountaintop, but in a Gothic castle located on a desolate island off the coast of Solitude. Castle Volkihar is a place of blood, bone, and brooding. When you enter the Great Hall, the atmosphere is heavy with the scent of raw meat. Vampires feast at long tables. Thralls, human cattle, are kept dazed and bleeding for the convenience of the guests. Harkon himself is an ancient vampire lord, a being of immense power and aristocracy. Unlike Alduin, who wants to destroy everything, Harkon wants to rule everything. His motivation is delightfully specific and maniacally self-centered. He wants to end the tyranny of the sun. He believes that by blotting out the sun, vampires will no longer have to skulk in the shadows. They can become the dominant species, feeding on mortals at will forever. The core in-game fact that drives this plot is the prophecy involving Auriel's bow. Harkon discovers that by tainting this holy artifact of the sun god with the blood of a daughter of Coldharbour, a pure-blooded vampire created directly by Molag Bal, he can corrupt the sun itself. This isn't just a generic doomsday, it is a tactical, albeit insane, military strike against the daylight. And the daughter of Coldharbour, he needs to bleed dry, just happens to be his own daughter, Serana. This family dynamic is what elevates Harkon leagues above Alduin. Alduin has no family he cares about. He mocks Parthenax, but that's it. Harkon, however, is defined by his broken family. He sacrificed his wife to the Soul Cairn. He views his daughter solely as a battery, a key to unlock his destiny. The horror of Dawnguard isn't the vampires, it's the domestic abuse. It's the father who looks at his child and sees a tool. This makes the player hate him. You don't just want to stop him to save the sun, you want to stop him to save Serana, who has likely become your favourite follower by this point because she actually has a personality. Harkon's boss fight is also a spectacle of blood magic. He transforms into a vampire lord, hovering above a blood fountain, draining the life from gargoyles to heal himself. It feels occult and personal. When you finally drive a stake, or an arrow, through his heart, it feels like an exorcism of a toxic legacy. But if Harkon provides the emotional stakes, Miraak, the antagonist of the Dragonborn DLC, provides the professional jealousy. Miraak is the first Dragonborn. He is the dark mirror of the player. He is what you could become if you let the power go to your head and spent a few thousand years reading forbidden books in a library made of slime. The introduction to Miraak is a masterclass in establishing dominance. You don't find him, his cultists find you. They attack you in the streets of Whiterun or Riverwood, calling you a false dragonborn. When you travel to the island of Solstheim to investigate, you are pulled into the realm of Apocrypha, the domain of Hermaeus Mora, the Daedric Prince of Knowledge. Here, in a realm of swirling green oceans, writhing tentacles and walls made of stacks of books, you meet him. Miraak rides a dragon, something you can't do yet. He wears a mask that looks like a Cthulhu-inspired fever dream, and he speaks to you. And so the first Dragonborn meets the last Dragonborn at the summit of Apocrypha. His voice is calm, arrogant, and dismissive. He doesn't even bother to kill you at first. He just insults you and sends you back to the mortal plane. But the real reason Miraak is the superior villain, and the reason players develop a burning personal hatred for him, is a specific gameplay mechanic. Once you've met him, Miraak will occasionally show up when you kill a dragon in the wild. Just as you're about to absorb the dragon's soul, that sweet, sweet currency of progression, Miraak appears in spectral form, shouts, "The soul is mine," and steals it. He steals your loot. Alduin threatens the world, which is abstract. Miraak threatens your progression, which is unforgivable. This mechanic enrages players more than any burnt village ever could. It creates a genuine rivalry. You are hunting him not to save Solstheim, but to get your refund. The lore surrounding Miraak is dense and fascinating, filled with obscure lore tidbits that link him to the deep history of the dragon cult. One such detail is the R4-word shout. In the game files and during the final battle, Miraak uses a shout that consists of 4 words, Z los di du. This translates roughly to "Spirit is mine, devour." This breaks the established rule of 3 for Thum, suggesting that Miraak has hacked the tonal architecture of reality itself through his pact with Hermaeus Mora. He isn't just using dragon magic. He is using eldritch knowledge to bend the rules of the universe. He is a cheater, and he is proud of it. This leads to a prevalent fan theory and community debate. Is the last Dragonborn doomed to become the new Miraak? The ending of the DLC is ambiguous. You defeat Miraak, but you do so under the watchful, many-eyed gaze of Hermaeus Mora. Mora impales Miraak on a tentacle when he realizes his champion has been surpassed, and then essentially hires you to take his place. Fans argue that by defeating Miraak you haven't won freedom, you've just signed a new employment contract. You are now the prisoner of Apocrypha, destined to hoard knowledge until the next Dragonborn comes along to kill you. It is a cyclical tragedy that adds a layer of existential dread to the victory. The setting of Miraak's story also shames the main quest. The throat of the world is just snow and wind. Apocrypha is a psychedelic nightmare. The skies are a sickly yellow-green. The water is acidic ink. Seekers float through the air reading books, and lurkers rise from the sludge to vomit tentacles at you. It is visually distinct and horrifying. Navigating the twisting corridors of the black books feels like descending into madness, whereas navigating Skuldurton just feels like descending into another Draugr crypt. Even the dialogue is superior. Miraak acknowledges your achievements. If you've killed Alduin before meeting him, he says, "You have done me a service, I suppose. I would have slain him myself eventually." He dismisses the main antagonist of the base game as a minor errand he just hadn't gotten around to yet. That level of arrogance is charismatic. It makes you want to beat him to prove him wrong. Comparing the final confrontations illuminates the disparity further. The fight with Alduin is a standard dragon fight with a bit of mist. The fight with Harkon involves teleportation, gargoyles, and shooting the sun. The fight with Miraak involves dragon riding, shouting battles, him healing himself by sacrificing his own dragon mounts, cruel but cinematic, and the intervention of a Daedric prince. These fights have phases, mechanics, and personality. Why would the Dragonborn rush to fight the World Eater when these two are out there? Harkon offers the allure of vampirism and a castle. Miraak offers the secrets of the universe and the ability to ride dragons. Alduin offers a pat on the back. The presence of these better antagonists serves to highlight just how vanilla the main quest truly is. Bethesda learned from the base game. They realised that a silent flying lizard isn't enough. Players need a face to punch. They need a voice to argue with. They need a reason to care. So, the Dragonborn lingers on Solstheim, exploring the mushroom towers of Tel Mithryn, or hangs round the Soul Cairn, arguing with Durnafir. The threat of the World Eater fades into the background noise, drowned out by the screams of the damned and the whisper of Hermaeus Mora. But even if you tire of the villains, there is another pull that keeps you from the main path. It isn't the bad guys, it's the good guys, or rather, the organisations that offer you a job, a bed, and a story arc that actually feels like it belongs to you. We're talking about the guilds, the true backbone of the Skyrim experience. While the DLC villains offer a masterclass in antagonism, there is another force in Skyrim that pulls the Dragonborn away from the main quest, with the gravitational force of a black hole, the guilds. If the main quest is about saving the world for people you don't know, the guild quests are about building a life with people you might actually like, or at least people who pay you on time. The narrative structure of the main quest is, by necessity, lonely. You are the last Dragonborn. There is no union for that, but the factions offer something the solitary road to Sovngarde cannot: a career path, a uniform, and a family. Whether that family is a pack of werewolves, a circle of mages, or a sanctuary of assassins, these storylines offer personal arcs that feel infinitely more rewarding than the abstract duty of being a prophecy. Take the Sun Dark Brotherhood, for instance. The introduction alone is more gripping than the entire opening sequence of Helgen. You aren't carted to an execution, you are kidnapped in your sleep by a woman in tight leather armour because you stole a kill from her. Waking up in that shack with Astrid perched on a bookshelf creates an immediate tense intimacy. The choice she offers, kill one of 3 captives, is a twisted moral test that defines your character more sharply than choosing between Ralof or Hadvar. The Brotherhood storyline is a dark comedy of errors and triumphs. You aren't just hacking Draugr, you're dropping gargoyles on a bride's head at her wedding. You are posing as the gourmet to poison the Emperor with a soup that contains a giant's toe. The writing here sparkles with a morbid wit that the main quest lacks, and at the centre of it is Cicero, the jester. Love him or hate him, his high-pitched madness and devotion to the Night Mother inject a chaotic energy into the game that makes Delphine look like a cardboard cutout. A core in-game fact. That elevates this questline is the sheer utility of its rewards. The main quest gives you shouts, which have cooldowns. The Dark Brotherhood gives you Shadow Mir, an immortal demon horse with glowing red eyes who can tank dragons. They give you the Ancient Shrouded Armour, which doubles your sneak attack damage. These aren't just plot coupons, they are tools that fundamentally change how you play the game. Then there is the Thieves Guild. If the Brotherhood is about family, the Thieves Guild is about capitalism. You start in the gutter, literally in the Ratway, and you work your way up to becoming a crime lord. The arc here is satisfyingly grounded. You aren't saving the world, you're saving the guild's bank account. You restore the guild to its former glory, visibly watching the cistern fill with loot and new merchants as you complete jobs. It is a visual representation of your progress that High Hrothgar never offers. Deep within this questline lies a fascinating piece of environmental storytelling that many players walk past 1,000 times without noticing. The Yust shadow marks. These small scratched symbols on the doorframes of houses in every major city are a secret language. A circle with a line through it means empty, don't bother. A triangle means safe. A diamond means thief-friendly. Once you learn to read them, often through a book found in the cistern, the entire city of Skyrim transforms from a collection of buildings into a menu of targets. It makes you feel like an insider, a true rogue. In a way the main quest never makes you feel like a true dragon hunter. The Thieves Guild also introduces the Nightingales, a secret inner circle dedicated to the Daedric Prince Nocturnal. The Nightingale armour is widely considered the fashion endgame of Skyrim. Let's be honest, looking cool is half the battle. Would you rather wear the clunky Blades armour, or the sleek hooded cape-wearing ensemble of a metaphysical super thief? The answer is obvious. Moving north, we find the College of Winterhold. While often criticised for its pacing, you can seemingly become Archmage in about a week, knowing only 2 spells. It offers a spectacle that rivals the main quest. The discovery of the Eye of Magnus, a massive swirling orb of arcane energy, creates a mystery that feels genuinely dangerous. And in Ancano, the Thalmor advisor, we get a villain who is delightfully hateable. He sneers, he plots, and he eventually tries to unmake reality right in the middle of the Hall of the Elements. The Labyrinthian Dilemma. Dungeon crawl in this questline is a standout. It isn't just a ruin, it is a journey into the past of the previous Archmage Savos Aren. As you descend, you hear ghostly echoes of Savos and his friends from decades ago, slowly realizing that he sacrificed them to contain the dragon priest Morokei. It is a tragic personal story of failure and regret that adds a layer of sorrow to the position you are about to inherit. You aren't just getting a robe, you're inheriting a legacy of mistakes. And finally, the companions. Whiterun. They offer the most primal power fantasy, lycanthropy. Becoming a werewolf changes the game entirely. You can sprint faster than a horse, send giants flying with a backhand, and feed on hearts to stay alive. It is a chaotic, bloody release valve for the structured gameplay. The core in-game fact here is the transformation itself. It grants 100% disease immunity, which is incredibly useful for survival mode players, even if you never use the beast form. The community debate surrounding the guilds often centers on the biggest jack of all trades absurdity. Is it immersive for one person to be the listener of the Night Mother, the guild master of the Thieves' Guild, the Archmage of Winterhold, and the Harbinger of the Companions, all while being the Dragonborn? Fans argue that this completionist approach dilutes the role-playing experience. How can you swear an oath to Hircine, werewolf, nocturnal, thief, and Sithis, assassin, simultaneously? Your soul is promised to about 6 different deities. When the Dragonborn dies, the afterlife court case for custody of their soul is going to be a legal nightmare. However, from a gameplay perspective, this freedom is intoxicating. The guilds allow you to live multiple lives. In the main quest, you're always the Dovahkiin. In the guilds, you can be a scholar, a brute, a ghost, or a businessman. You can buy a house in Rifton and roleplay a corrupt merchant. You can live in the college and pretend to study restoration. There is also an obscure lore tidbit, connecting the Thieves' Guild and the Dark Brotherhood that delights lore hunters. Delvin Mallory, the fence in the Thieves' Guild, has a history with Astrid of the Brotherhood. If you join the Brotherhood, you can ask him about it, and he implies a past romance or at least a very close working relationship, hinting at a web of underworld connections that spans the province. Additionally, the presence of the Litany of Larceny. Unique items you can steal and display in the guild appeals to the collector in every gamer. You can steal the Golden Bee statue. You can steal the eyes of the Thalmor statue. It satisfies the goblin brain desire to hoard shiny objects. Ultimately, the guild quests offer closure. You finish the storyline, you get a title, you get a base of operations, and people call you boss. In the main quest, you defeat Alduin, and the guards still ask you if someone stole your sweet roll. The world doesn't care, but in the cistern or the sanctuary or the Hall of Attainment, you are the king. Why would anyone trade the warmth of the mead hall, the camaraderie of the shield siblings, or the dark whispers of the Night Mother for a lonely trek to a temple no one can reach? The guilds provide a sense of belonging in a cold province. They make Skyrim feel like home, rather than just a battlefield. But eventually the quest log runs dry. The contracts are fulfilled. The shelves are full of loot. The Dragonborn looks at the unfinished Fallen quest and sighs. It is time to finish what was started. It is time to go to Skuldafn. And sadly, this is where the open world magic finally breaks, as the game forces you onto a set of rails from which there is no return. The moment has arrived. The Dragonborn stands on the great porch of Dragon's Reach, the wind whipping through the wooden pillars. Trapped before them, humbled and bound by the yoke of the Thuum, is Odarviing. The Red Dragon bargains for his freedom, offering a ride to the one place in Tamriel that cannot be reached by foot, horse, or obsessive mountain climbing. Skuldafn Temple. This moment marks the definitive point of no return. In a game defined by the absolute freedom to walk away from any conversation and chase a butterfly, this transition is jarring. The guard warns you, the dragon warns you. The game interface essentially asks, are you sure you want to leave the fun part of the game? Because once you climb onto Odahviing's neck and the screen fades to black, the sandbox is closed. You are entering the railroaded finale, and for the first time in hundreds of hours, you cannot fast travel to Whiterun to sell your loot. Skuldafn is a fortress of isolation. Perched high in the Velothi Mountains, it is an ancient eyrie dedicated to the dragon cult. The location itself is striking. Sprawling stone arches, snow-covered courtyards, and dragons circling overhead like vultures. But the beauty is undercut by a sudden claustrophobic realization. You are trapped. If you didn't bring enough health potions, you're in trouble. If you run out of arrows, you're scavenging ancient gnawed arrows from corpses. If your inventory is full, you're dropping valuable dragon bones in the snow. This anxiety creates a friction that makes the final act feel less like an epic conclusion and more like a logistical nightmare. The core gameplay loop of Skyrim, explore, loot, sell, upgrade, is broken. You're now playing a linear action game, a gauntlet of combat that stretches on for what feels like an eternity. And it is a gauntlet. Skuldafn is populated by high-level Draugr deathlords and scourges, the kind that can shout your weapon out of your hand. This leads to the frantic, undignified search for your legendary Daedric sword in the tall grass, while a zombie swings an ebony axe at your head. It is a difficulty spike that feels punishing rather than challenging, largely because it strips you of your ability to retreat and regroup. A third, core in-game fact that haunts completionists is the exclusivity of this location. Skuldafn is the only location in the entire game that cannot be revisited. Once you leave, it is gone from the map forever. This means that if you miss anything unique here, it is lost to the void. This triggers a frantic loot anxiety in the player. You are checking every urn, every corner, terrified of missing a unique book or item, and indeed, there is something crucial to miss. At the very summit of the temple guarding the portal to Sovngarde hovers the dragon priest, Nakreen. He is one of the 8 high-ranking priests whose masks are required to unlock the final shrine in Labyrinthian. If you kill him and forget to loot his mask, perhaps because you were rushed, or he fell off a cliff, or you are just desperate to jump into the portal, you can never complete the Dragon Priest mask collection. Kunaric, the Warlord mask, becomes unobtainable. For a collector, this design choice is a nightmare. It creates a fear of missing out, FOMO, that distracts from the narrative urgency. Instead of thinking, I must stop Alduin, you're thinking, I better double check this corpse so I don't ruin my save file. The interior of Skuldafn Temple offers little respite. It is, for all intents and purposes, just another Nord ruin. After clearing Bleakfall's Barrow, Ustengrav and a dozen others, the architecture here is disappointingly familiar. You have the puzzle doors with the rotating animal totems, snake, whale, eagle. You have the pressure plates. You have the oil slicks. It feels like a greatest hits compilation of dungeon tropes you have already mastered. There is no unique mechanic, no environmental twist that sets the Dragon Cult's headquarters apart from a generic bandit cave, other than the density of high-level enemies. The obscure lore tidbit regarding Nakreen adds a layer of depth that is easily missed in the heat of battle. His name, in the dragon tongue, translates to vengeance. Lore scholars speculate on what exactly he is avenging. Is he the cult's vengeance against the rebellious mortals, or is he a jailer keeping the portal sealed to prevent mortals from trespassing in the afterlife? He wields a unique staff, the Dragon Priest Staff, which is the key to opening the portal. Interestingly, the staff acts as a battery. You have to plug it into the seal to activate the gate. It implies that the portal to heaven isn't magic, it's technology. The dragon cult had a mechanical understanding of how to breach the planes of Ritherius. The community debate surrounding Skuldafn often centres on the Puersturt. Railroading versus pacing. Argument. Defenders argue that the linearity creates the necessary tension for a finale. It focuses the mind. Critics, however, argue that Skyrim is a game about choice, and stripping that choice away in the final hour betrays the game's identity. They point to games like Fallout New Vegas, where the final battle allows for various factions and approaches. In Skuldafn, there's only one way forward: kill everything. You cannot sneak past Nakreen, you need his staff. You cannot talk him down, you must be the butcher. There is a moment of calm, however, right before the end. You reach the roof. The sky is churning with a supernatural storm. The portal to Sovngarde stands before you, a swirling column of light and wind. It is a spectacular visual. The sound design is deafening. The roar of the wind, the crackle of magic. You confront Nakreen, take his staff, and open the way. As you step into the light, leaving the mortal plane behind, there is a sense of relief. Not because you are saving the world, but because you are finally leaving that dungeon. You're escaping the endless waves of Death Lords. But the relief is short-lived. You're not going back to Whiterun yet. You're going to the afterlife. And while Sovngarde is legendary in the lore, a place of feasting and glory, the gameplay reality of it is strangely empty. The game has one last visual feast to offer, but it comes with a hollow aftertaste. The screen fades to white. The sounds of Nirn fade away. You have crossed the threshold. You are dead, but dreaming. And as the mist clears, you see the Whalebone Bridge and the Hall of Valor. It is time to meet the heroes of old. But first, you have to navigate the fog. And unfortunately, the fog is about as exciting as it sounds. Stepping through the portal from Skuldafn is not just a change of location, it is a change of palette. The Dragonborn leaves behind the grey stones and white snow of the mortal plane to enter a realm of vivid, breathtaking colour. You stand in Sovngarde, the Nordic afterlife, and for the first time in the entire game you look up and realise that the sky itself is the reward. Visually, Sovngarde is a triumph. The skybox is a swirling nebula of purples, golds and deep indigos, starfields stretching into infinity. Massive statues of ancient Nord warriors line the path, towering over the landscape like silent sentinels of history. The music shifts to a deep, resonant male choir, the Sovngarde theme, chanting in a rhythm that feels like a heartbeat. It is heavy, solemn, and utterly magnificent. It is the one moment where the game truly delivers on the epic fantasy promise without reservation. You feel, genuinely, like you have walked into a myth. But as the initial awe fades and you begin to move forward, you realise that this myth is remarkably light on interactivity. Sovngarde, for all its splendour, is essentially a very pretty corridor, and to make matters worse, it is a corridor filled with fog. Alduin, in his role as the World Eater, has cast a soul snare mist over the valley to trap the lost souls of the dead so he can devour them at his leisure. This sets up the primary gameplay loop of the afterlife. The Clear Skies minigame. You walk into the mist. You cannot see 3 feet in front of you. You shout Lok Vakor. The mist clears for a few moments, revealing the path. You walk, the mist returns. You wait for your shout cool down. You shout again. It is a mechanic that feels less like a heroic struggle and more like tedious road maintenance. You're essentially the janitor of the afterlife, mopping up the weather so you can see where you're going. Along the way, you encounter lost souls, nameless stormcloaks or imperials, and perhaps a few named characters like Ulfric or Galmar if you killed them in the Civil War. They wander aimlessly, terrified of the dragon. You can't save them. You can't lead them to safety. You just walk past them. It is atmospheric, certainly, but mechanically empty. At the end of the misty path lies the Whalebone Bridge, a skeletal span made from the spine of some primordial beast, and guarding it is Tsun. Tsun is the shield thane of Shor, the Nordic god of the underworld. He is a massive figure, half giant, wearing little more than a loincloth and a helmet. He acts as the bouncer of Valhalla. To cross the bridge, you must prove your worth in a trial of combat. The Arcorin game fact: here is Tsun's identity. He is the Nordic aspect of Zenithar, the god of toil and commerce, but here he represents the trial of adversity. He is an ancient god standing right in front of you, and the interaction: you hit him with a sword until he says uncle. The fight is straightforward. He has a lot of health and hits like a truck, but once you reduce him to about half health, he yields. You are worthy, he bellows and steps aside. It is a satisfying, if simple, duel. It feels like a handshake made of violence. Crossing the bridge, you enter the Ost Hall of Valor. This is the mead hall to end all mead halls. The interior is warm, bathed in the golden light of roasting fires. The tables are groaning under the weight of roasted oxen and endless flagons of mead. And seated at these tables are the heroes of legend. This is the ultimate fan service moment for lore nerds. You see Wise Gramaga, the first human conqueror of Skyrim, chatting with his companions. You see Jurgen Windcaller, the founder of the Greybeards. You see Olaf One-Eye, the Jarl you likely burned in effigy during the Bard's College questline. It is a who's who of Nordic history. However, the empty gameplay critique hits hard here. You cannot interact with 90% of these legends beyond a generic greetings dragonborn bark. You cannot sit down and have a drink with Ysgramor. You cannot ask Jurgen Windcaller if he regrets his pacifism. You cannot challenge Olaf to a drinking contest. The Hall of Valor is a museum exhibit behind glass. You can look, but you cannot touch. For a game built on simulation, where you can pick up every apple and read every book, the fact that you cannot interact with the feast in the afterlife is a strange omission. You are a tourist in heaven. But the most glaring omission in the Hall of Valor leads to one of the most fascinating fan theories and community debates in the entire franchise. Where is Shor? Shor, the Nordic version of Lorcan, is the god who built this place. It is his hall. Yet, his massive throne at the head of the room is empty. When you ask the heroes where he is, they give a vague answer. Shor's high seat stands empty. His mien is too bright for mortal eyes. Essentially, they say that if you looked at him, you would die again. But the community has a different theory. They argue that Shor is not missing. You are Shor. The theory of the Shezarintam posits that the player character is Navatar of Lorcan Jahur, sent to Nirn to defend creation. This is why you can sit on his throne. Yes, the game lets you sit in the empty chair. This is why Tsun treats you with such immediate deference after the trial. This is why you are the only one who can defeat Alduin. You are the landlord returning to Evik the Squatter. The emptiness of the throne is not a budget constraint. It is a metaphysical clue. You are looking at your own seat. There is also an obscure lore tidbit regarding the 3 heroes you are here to recruit. Gormleth Golden Hilt, Hakon One-Eye, and Feldir the Old. These are the ancient tongues you saw in the Elder Scroll vision. While they are crucial to the plot, their presence here raises a grim question about the nature of Sovngarde. They have been waiting here for thousands of years, specifically for you. They have been denied their rest, stuck in a perpetual state of readiness, knowing that one day they would have to fight Alduin again. Their paradise has been a waiting room for war. As you gather these three heroes, the energy in the hall shifts. It is time to leave the warmth of the fire. The mead and the music were a brief respite. You must head back out into the mist to confront the World Eater. The pacing of this section is strange. You arrive, you walk through fog, you fight a bouncer, you look at some famous ghosts, and then you leave. There is no dungeon to clear, no puzzle to solve, other than the fog, and no loot to gather. In fact, if you try to take things from the Hall of Valor, you often can't. The roasted ox leg is static geometry. This lack of stuff makes Sovngarde feel disconnected from the rest of the game. Skyrim trains you to be a hoarder, a scavenger. Sovngarde forces you to be purely an actor in a play. It strips away the sandbox elements to focus entirely on the cinematic. For some, this is a welcome focus. For others, it feels like the game is running out of ideas. But the stage is set. You have your squad, 3 ancient ghost warriors. You have your shout. You have the backdrop of the cosmos. You step out of the Hall of Valor, and the 3 heroes shout to clear the mist once and for all. The sky opens up, revealing the full majesty of the nebula. Alduin descends. This should be the greatest boss fight in the history of the genre. The god of destruction versus the god of heroes and his 3 ghost buddies in the centre of the galaxy. It has all the ingredients of a masterpiece. Unfortunately, ingredients alone do not make a meal. As the battle begins, you quickly realise that for all the visual splendour, the mechanics of fighting Alduin are distressingly familiar. You aren't fighting a god, you're fighting a reskinned frost dragon with a larger health bar. The mythic impact is about to collide with the reality of the game engine. The mist has parted. The skies of Sovngarde, a swirling tapestry of ethereal energy, stretch out above you. Standing beside you are Gormleth Golden Hilt, Hakon One Eye, and Feldir the Old, the legendary tongues who banished the World Eater thousands of years ago. You have the Dragon Wren shout locked and loaded. The music swells, a primal chanting crescendo that promises the battle to end all battles. Alduin descends from the heavens, his black scales contrasting sharply against the luminous nebula. He roars, a sound that shakes the very foundations of the afterlife, and then he lands, and you hit him with a stick. We have arrived at the climax of the main quest, the confrontation with Alduin, the first dragon, the World Eater, and tragically, we have also arrived at the most significant anticlimax in the game's mechanical design. The battle with Alduin serves as the ultimate proof that Skyrim's combat system, while fun for clearing bandit camps, is woefully ill-equipped to handle godslaying. The fundamental issue is one of scale and mechanics. In the lore, Alduin is a cosmic entity. He's not just a big lizard, he's a fundamental aspect of the Arbis, the universe. He eats time, he swallows ages. When he fights, reality should scream, but in the game, Alduin functions on the exact same AI script as Mirmulnir, the first dragon you fought at the Western Watchtower 40 hours ago. He flies in circles, he breathes fire, he lands, he bites, he takes off again. There is no unique boss mechanic that requires you to climb his back, or deflect a moon he throws at you, or engage in a metaphysical debate while dodging lasers. The strategy remains: wait for him to land, run up to his ankles and spam the attack button until the red bar at the top of the screen goes away. For a player who has likely crafted dragonbone weapons and enchanted them to deal thousands of points of damage, the God of Destruction can often be felled in less than 30 seconds. The Keystone core in-game fact that attempts to set this fight apart is Alduin's unique shout, Dragonstorm Call. Unlike regular dragons, Alduin can summon a rain of meteors. The sky turns red, and fiery rocks pummel the arena. Visually it is impressive. The screen shakes, the fireballs crash down, and the chaos is palpable, but mechanically, it is essentially just an area of effect hazard. You step out of the red circles, or you just tank the damage because by this point in the game, you probably have 500 health and a pocket full of ultimate healing potions. It looks like the apocalypse, but it feels like mild weather. Compounding the lack of difficulty is the presence of your 3 ghost buddies. Gormley, Harkon and Feldir are not just cheerleaders, they are high-level NPCs with essential status. They cannot die. They draw aggro. They shout Dragonrend. In many playthroughs, if the Dragonborn decides to just stand there and eat a sweet roll, the 3 heroes will eventually whittle Alduin's health down on their own. The Dragonborn feels less like the chosen one, and more like the 4th player in a co-op lobby who is being carried by the veterans. This leads to a jarring dissonance between the narrative stakes and the gameplay reality. The Greybeards told you that only you can stop him. The prophecy says the wheel turns upon you. But in practice, Gormleth Golden Hilt seems perfectly capable of kneecapping the World Eater, while you take screenshots of the skybox. There is an obscure lore tidbit hidden in the game files and stats that reinforces this disappointment. Alduin is statistically weaker than several other enemies in the game. If you have the Dragonborn DLC installed, a legendary dragon has significantly higher stats than Alduin. The Dwyer Ebony Warrior, a challenger who appears when you reach level 80, would wipe the floor with Alduin. Even Custag, the ghost of a frost giant king found in the DLC, is harder to beat. The end boss of the base game is effectively a mid-tier encounter in the grand scope of the Legendary Edition. He has a level cap. He doesn't scale infinitely with the player. This means if you procrastinated the main quest to reach level 60, which as we've established everyone does, you are essentially fighting a toddler. This weakness has spawned a massive fan theory and community debate. The Alduin was weakened theory. Fans argue that Alduin was not trying to eat the world during the events of Skyrim, he was trying to conquer it. By abandoning his mythic role as the World Eater to play king and resurrect the dragon cult, he forsook his divinity. He became part of the Kalpa, the cycle, rather than the end of it. This is why he is mortal-ish. This is why he can be hurt. He downgraded himself from a force of nature to a political tyrant. It is brilliant theory that fixes the plot holes, but it doesn't make the fight any more fun. The Dragonren mechanic itself also contributes to the monotony. The shout is required to force him to land. Once he is grounded, he is vulnerable. But the cooldown on Dragonrend is short, and with 4 people shouting it, you plus the ghosts, Alduin spends most of the fight stumbling around on the ground, stun-locked. He looks less like a terrifying deity, and more like a confused bird that flew into a window. Furthermore, the arena of Sovngarde, while pretty, is flat. There is no verticality to the fight. You aren't chasing him up the statues or jumping across floating islands. You're fighting in a field. Compare this to the boss fights in other action RPGs of the era, like Dark Souls or Dragon's Dogma, where giant monsters require climbing, weak point targeting, and pattern memorization. Skyrim asks you to hit the hitbox, and then comes the death. When you finally deplete his health bar, there is no ragdoll collapse. Instead, Alduin goes into a convulsing animation. He shouts in agony. His black scales begin to crack and peel away, revealing a burning, slimy core beneath. He explodes. This explosion is admittedly cool. It is a shockwave of soul energy that blasts the mist away forever. But then, nothing. You do not absorb his soul. This is the final insult to the loot goblin brain. You have spent the entire game absorbing dragon souls to unlock shouts. You just killed the biggest dragon. You expect a soul worth 10 points. You expect a new shout. You expect to loot his corpse for Alduin's scale or Teeth of the World Eater, to craft a god-tier sword. But you get nothing. No soul, no bones, no scales. He simply disintegrates. The lore reason is sound. Alduin is not a normal dragon. His soul belongs to Akatosh directly. Or perhaps he isn't truly dead, merely reset for the end of time. But the gameplay feeling is emptiness. You risked your life, travelled to the afterlife, and all you got was a light show. Tsun congratulates you. The World Eater is dead, he booms. The heroes cheer. But the player is often left standing there, weapon drawn, spinning the camera around thinking, is that it? The lack of a second phase is the final nail in the coffin. Most final bosses have a transformation. They get bigger, or they turn into pure energy, or they transport you to a nightmare realm. Alduin just dies. The fight lacks the crescendo of a true finale. It feels like just another Radiant quest, merely one that took place in a nice zip code. As you walk back to Tsun to be returned to the mortal world, the feeling isn't triumph. It is routine. You did the job. You clocked in, you killed the dragon, you clocked out. The epic scope of the prophecy has been reduced to a simple extermination job. Tsun teaches you a new shout. Call of Valor, which allows you to summon one of the 3 heroes to help you in battle. It is a nice reward, certainly. Having a ghost tank is useful. But it doesn't change the fact that the climax of the story felt like a tutorial for a game mechanic you mastered 50 hours ago. The portal opens. You step through, leaving the Hall of Valor and the disappointment behind. You return to the throat of the world. The wind is howling, the snow is falling, and waiting for you are the other dragons. This is where the game attempts to give you a send-off. A massive gathering of dragons surrounds the peak, mourning or celebrating Alduin's fall. Parthenax is there. Odafying is there. They shout in unison, acknowledging your Thuum. Alduin Mahlan. Alduin is fallen. It is a cinematic moment that tries to patch the hole left by the boss fight. It acknowledges your power, but as the dragons fly away and the music fades, you're left alone on the mountain. You look at your quest log. The main quest is greyed out, completed, and you realise, with a sinking feeling, that the world below doesn't look any different. The war is arguably still raging, the bandits are still on the roads, the guards are still complaining about arrow wounds. You saved the world, but the world didn't seemingly notice. The world ignorance is the hangover that follows the victory. You descend the mountain, expecting a parade, or at least a discount at the shops. But what you find is a realm that is frustratingly, stubbornly unchanged. You descend the 7,000 steps, your boots crunching on the snow. The adrenaline of the final battle is fading, replaced by a quiet sense of accomplishment. You have done it. You have fulfilled the prophecy. You have ventured into the literal afterlife, bested the World Eater, and returned to the land of the living. You are the saviour of Nirn. You are the Ysmir, the dragon of the north. Naturally, you expect things to be different. You expect the world to feel saved. You expect the skies to be clearer, the people to be cheerier, and perhaps, just perhaps, for the Jarls to throw a parade in your honour. Instead, you fast travel to Whiterun, walk through the main gates, and a guard looks you dead in the eye. You, the wearer of Daedric armour, the slayer of Alduin, the smell of ozone and soul mist still clinging to your cloak, and sneers. Let me guess. Someone stole your sweet roll? This brings us to the most crushing realization of the entire main quest saga. The world of Skyrim simply does not care that you saved it. The world ignorance phenomenon is the wet blanket that smothers the fires of your victory. In many RPGs, beating the final boss triggers a changed world state. NPCs cheer, the skybox changes, or at least the music becomes triumphant. In Skyrim, the simulation is so committed to its own routine that it refuses to acknowledge the apocalypse has been cancelled. Nazim still asks if you get to the Cloud District very often, implying you're a peasant, even though you are the Thane of every hold and the personal friend of the gods. Belethor still offers to sell you his sister. The beggar still asks for a gold piece. The disconnect is profound. You have just engaged in a mythic struggle for the concept of time itself. You have prevented the end of the Kalpa, yet the gameplay loop instantly demotes you back to random adventurer. You walk into Dragon's Reach to see Jarl Balgruuf. Surely he will have something to say. He might have a line or two of generic praise. I heard the news, good work. But then he immediately reverts to his default dialogue about the war or his children. There is no feast. There is no statue erected in your honour, unlike in Oblivion where the hero's sacrifice is immortalised in stone. Here is a core in-game fact that twists the knife. The dragons don't even stop attacking. You killed their leader. You killed the one being who could resurrect them. Logic would dictate that the dragon attacks would cease, or at least become incredibly rare as the remaining beasts went into hiding. But no, the Radiant quest system demands content. You will still be harassed by blood dragons every time you try to fast travel to Morthal. The threat hasn't been neutralized. It has just lost its narrative context. Now they are just flying bears that interrupt your shopping trips. This lack of consequence extends to the civil war as well. If you paused the war to finish the main quest via the season-unending council, you might expect the truce to hold, or for the factions to unite in the face of the revelation that the end of the world was real. But the moment Alduin is dead, the truce evaporates. General Tullius and Ulfric Stormcloak go right back to killing each other. The epic struggle against the World Eater is treated as a minor weather delay in the schedule of their political squabbles. It forces the player to ask, what did I actually change? The landscape is the same. The politics are the same. The economy is the same. The only difference is that one specific dragon is gone, and you have a new shout you will rarely use. There is an obscure lore tidbit that attempts to explain this apathy, rooted in the metaphysical concept of the cool, Kalpa. In the Elder Scrolls cosmology, the world is cyclical. It begins, it exists, and it is eaten by Alduin to be reborn. By stopping Alduin, the Dragonborn hasn't saved the world in a traditional sense. They have merely stagnated it. They have forced the current Kalpa to continue past its expiration date. Some deep lore scholars argue that the world's indifference is a symptom of this stagnation. The world wanted to end. The fatigue, the grey conflict, the ruin. It is all evidence of a reality that is tired. By keeping it alive, you are essentially forcing a terminally ill patient to keep running a marathon. The world doesn't cheer because the world is exhausted. This leads to a fascinating community debate. The Dream of the Godhead. theory, in the deepest, most esoteric lore, often stemming from the writings of Michael Kirkbride, the entire universe of the Elder Scrolls is the dream of a sleeping entity known as the Godhead. If the dreamer wakes up, reality vanishes. Some fans argue that the Dragonborn's victory is so anticlimactic because waking up the world to the reality of its own destruction would end the dream. Therefore, the dream self-corrects. It ignores the trauma. It smooths over the cracks. The guard must ask about the sweet roll because if he acknowledged that a dragon ate time, the sheer existential horror might destabilize the reality of the simulation. It is a metafictional way of excusing the limits of 2011 AI, but it fits surprisingly well. But from a purely emotional standpoint, the emptiness of the post-game is why so many players never finish the main quest on subsequent playthroughs. Why rush to the end if the end looks exactly like the beginning? The Radiant quest system becomes the villain here. The game is designed to be played forever. To achieve this, it cannot have a definitive happy ending where peace reigns, because peace is boring gameplay. So the Blades give you infinite dragon hunting quests. The Companions give you infinite animal extermination quests. You go from Saviour of the Universe to local exterminator in the span of one loading screen. Consider the contrast with the ending of The Elder Scrolls War: Oblivion. In that game, the barriers to Oblivion are permanently sealed, the sky changes colour, the Emperor is gone, the outcome of the main quest is etched into the political reality of the world. In Skyrim, the most significant change is that the guards have a 5% chance to say, "They say you defeated the World Eater. I owe you a drink." They never buy you that drink. Even the Dragonborn's own status remains in limbo. You are the ultimate authority, yet you hold no office. You cannot become High King without mods. You cannot order the Jarls to do anything. You are a weapon with no handle, wandering from town to town, selling dragon bones to merchants who only have 750 gold and complain about the economy. The world ignorance effectively breaks the role-playing contract. A role-playing game relies on the illusion that your choices matter. When the world refuses to reflect your massive achievement, the illusion shatters. You realize you aren't a hero. You're just a cursor moving through a static background. This creates a sense of melancholy. You wander the tundra. The music is beautiful. Kind's peace plays softly. The auroras shimmer. It is still the most beautiful game world ever made. But you feel like a ghost. You've outgrown the narrative container. You have become too big for Skyrim, yet you are trapped within its borders. And so, the player looks for a way out. Not a way out of the game, but a way out of the identity of the Dragonborn. If being the chosen one yields nothing but indifference, then perhaps it is better to be someone else entirely. This is the final reason the main quest is skippable, because the Dragonborn story is the least interesting life you can lead in Skyrim. The true magic lies in the lives you were never meant to live, the stories the developers didn't write but gave you the tools to construct. You close the quest journal, you look at the map, and you realise that the next time you boot up the game, you don't want to wake up in that cart. You don't want to hear, "Hey you're finally awake." You want to wake up in a shipwreck. You want to wake up as a vampire in a cave. You want to wake up as a patron in an inn, with no destiny other than to pay your tab. You're ready for the ultimate act of rebellion against the main quest. You're ready to install the mod that changes everything. And so, we arrive at the final destination of our journey, which is, paradoxically, a new beginning. We've critiqued the pacing, lamented the villains, and sighed at the lack of a ticker tape parade in Whiterun. But for millions of players, the solution to the main quest problem isn't to fix it, it's to delete it entirely. We're talking about the transformative power of the alternate start, If you have played Skyrim more than once, you know the feeling of dread that accompanies the New Game button. The Bethesda logo fades, the black screen lingers, the sound of wheels on cobblestones fades in, and then the line that launched 1,000 memes. Hey you, you're finally awake. The cart ride to Helgen is iconic, yes, but it is also a narrative straitjacket. It forces a backstory upon you. You're a criminal caught crossing the border. You're on a list. You're destined to see a dragon in 5 minutes. For a game that promises infinite freedom, the first hour is a rigid corridor of scripted events. You must follow Ralof or Hadvar. You must run through the keep. You must go to Riverwood. Enter the modding community, the true heroes of the Elder Scrolls legacy. Specifically, we look to the mod Alternate Start, Live Another Life, and its spiritual successors like Realm of Lorcan. This mod doesn't just change the spawn point, it changes the genre of the game. When you install this mod, you don't wake up in a cart, you wake up in a damp, abandoned prison cell. There is a statue of Mara in the corner. You approach the goddess of love, and she asks you a simple question. Who are you? The menu that opens is a doorway to the true Skyrim experience. You can choose to be a patron at an inn. You can be a vampire in a secluded lair. You can be a shipwrecked sailor off the coast of Dawnstar, freezing to death before the game even properly begins. You can be a necromancer in a secret lab. Or simpler still, you can just be a hunter camping in the woods. This choice fundamentally alters the core in-game factii of the world state. If you never go to Helgen, the main quest never starts. If the main quest never starts, the dragons never spawn. Think about the implications of that. For the first time, the skies of Skyrim are safe. You can explore the open plains of Whiterun without looking up every 30 seconds. You can fast travel without fear of finding a skeleton in your living room when you load in. The false urgency we discussed in section 1 is gone. The world is no longer ending, it is just existing. This allows for a level of role-playing that the vanilla game suffocates. You're no longer the Dragonborn in waiting. You're just a guy named Bjorn who wants to sell cabbages. You can focus entirely on the economic simulation or the survival mechanics. You can join the Legion as a grunt and stay a grunt without being fast-tracked to special forces because of your voice. The obscure lore. Tidbit. Here isn't written in a book, but in the code itself. The game is surprisingly stable when you break the Dragonborn script. The dialogue adapts, mostly by silence. People don't call you Dragonborn because you haven't done anything. You are a nobody. And in a world filled with gods and monsters, being a nobody is a luxury. It allows you to appreciate the little lore. You pay more attention to the feud between the Battleborns and Greymanes because that is the biggest news in town. The theft of the Golden Claw becomes the crime of the century, not a tutorial quest. This feeds into the community debaters regarding headcanon. Many role-players argue that the most immersive way to play Skyrim is to reject the Chosen One narrative entirely. They create characters with flaws, fears, and mundane goals. My character hates magic and refuses to touch it. My character is afraid of caves. In the vanilla intro, these restrictions are impossible. You have to go into caves. You have to deal with magic dragons. With an alternate start, your headcanon becomes the actual canon of your playthrough. There is a specific start in the mod, I am a warlock's thrall, that places you in a cave with high-level warlocks who are hostile to everyone except you. You start with nothing. Escaping that cave is a survival horror game. It is a story of liberation that feels earned, intimate, and raw. It beats the destiny of the main quest because it is your story. You survived because you were smart, not because Akatosh blessed you. And if you ever decide you do want to save the world, the mod accounts for that. You can travel to Helgen at any time. You find the town destroyed, a burnt corpse with a journal, and the quest triggers. But you can do this at level 50. You can arrive as a seasoned veteran who stumbles upon a tragedy, rather than a confused prisoner swept up in it. It fixes the pacing. Ultimately, the alternate start proves that the main quest was never the point of Skyrim. The point was the land. The point was the sunset over solitude, the sound of the wind in the reach, the smell of juniper berries. The story Bethesda wrote is fine, but the stories you write when they stop holding your hand are masterpieces. By skipping the main quest, you aren't missing out. You're opting into the True Sandbox. You're accepting the invitation the world gave you in that first moment, to walk off the path, ignore the greybeards and just live. And there we have it, Travellers. 15 reasons why the greatest threat to Tamriel might just be the most skippable part of your adventure. We have climbed the 7,000 steps, debated with dragons, and navigated the bureaucratic nightmares of the Blades. We have seen the beauty of the afterlife and the emptiness of a world that refuses to acknowledge its saviour. But in the end, perhaps that is the secret genius of this world. It doesn't need a hero to be beautiful. It just needs a witness. As you lay there now, letting the weight of the day sink into the mattress, imagine yourself back in that landscape. Not as the Dragonborn shouting at the sky, but as a simple traveller. Picture the campfire crackling at your feet. The stars above are not omens of doom. They are just lights, cold and clear. The wind rustling the pine branches isn't whispering a prophecy. It's just the breath of the mountain, steady and slow. You're safe here. There are no quest markers demanding your attention. There are no couriers running toward you with urgent letters. The map is empty, and that is a good thing. It means the path ahead is yours to choose, or not to choose at all. You can stay right here, by the fire, watching the embers fade from orange to grey. Let the worries of your own main quest, your work, your obligations, your deadlines, fade away with them. They are just Radiance quests after all. They will be there tomorrow, but for now the journal is closed, the inventory is managed, the game is saved. Breathe in the digital pine air. Listen to the quiet hum of the night. You have done enough. You have explored enough. Now it is time to rest. Sweet dreams.